Andre Whitfield was 41 years old, standing at his gate in Atlanta, boarding pass in hand, 3 hours from burying his mother. He was the steady one, the husband who confirmed every reservation twice, who'd built the financial systems his wife's entire business ran on, who never once complained about being the reliable background to her spotlight. His phone rang. His wife, Patrice. He assumed she was calling to wish him a safe flight. She wasn't. In a voice flat with certainty, she told him she'd called the airline 20 minutes earlier and canceled his ticket herself, using the very account access he'd given her. He needed to learn his priorities, she said. And this was how she was teaching him. Andre stood frozen as the boarding line moved past him, his mother's funeral now starting without him, his wife's words settling into something colder than grief. She had no idea what she'd just canceled along with that flight, and she wouldn't find out for months. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The boarding line moved slow and steady, the way Andre liked things to move. He stood third from the front, rolling bag at his side, laptop bag strapped across his chest, boarding pass pulled up on his phone. Gate B14 at Hartsfield-Jackson smelled like old coffee and recycled air. The gate agent's voice crackled through the overhead speaker, calling out the last boarding group. Andre had already been called. He was just waiting on the 2 people ahead of him to hand over their passes and shuffle through. He typed with his thumb while he waited. Landing in 3 hours. Tell Mama I'm on my way. He hit send and watched the message thread with Yolanda go gray, then blue. She read it fast. She'd been at their mother's bedside in Tuscaloosa for the last 4 days. Andre had been trying to get there since Monday, but work had piled up the way it always did when he couldn't afford it to. He'd cleared everything yesterday, submitted the PTO, handed off his open logistics reports to his deputy, confirmed the car rental on the other end. He confirmed everything twice. Always. That was just who he was. At 41, Andre Whitfield had built his entire life on the quiet satisfaction of systems that worked. His job as a senior operations director was essentially that, building processes that held together under pressure. He was good at it, very good. And somewhere along the way, that same instinct had bled into everything else. His bills were on autopay. His retirement contributions adjusted themselves every January. He kept a shared calendar with color-coded blocks that told both him and Patrice exactly where the other one was supposed to be at any given hour. He managed the household travel rewards account, the one they'd built up together over 9 years using points from flights, hotels, and the company card he'd helped set up for Patrice's event planning business, Éclat Occasions. He'd built her business banking portal from scratch, walked her through it twice, then quietly kept the admin access because Patrice had zero patience for back-end systems and said so plainly. That's your world, baby. I do the pretty stuff. He'd laughed at that. He still managed it without complaint. The line moved again. One person ahead of him now. His mind drifted back 2 nights. Tuesday. He'd been at the kitchen table, packing his laptop bag and going through his checklist out loud, half talking to himself, half talking to Patrice, who was sitting across from him, with a glass of white wine and her phone in her hand. I'll be gone about a week, he'd said. Maybe a little more, depending on how things go. You've got the card for anything the caterers need before the gala. Patrice had looked up from her phone. She'd smiled, the smooth, polished smile she wore when something wasn't quite sitting right with her, but she'd decided not to say so yet. I'll be fine, she'd said. You sure? I know the launch is next Friday. I hate that I'm going to miss the setup week. She'd waved her hand like she was shooing something away. Andre, go be with your mother. I've got Bianca. He'd nodded. He'd been relieved, honestly. He'd expected tension. Patrice had been wired tight for the last month, laser-focused on the gala, prone to frustration when anything pulled his attention sideways, but she'd seemed calm. Almost too calm, though he hadn't let himself sit with that thought long enough to examine it. He had other things to confirm. He'd gone back to his checklist. The gate agent scanned the pass of the person ahead of him. Andre stepped forward, shifting his bag, phone already extended. He felt the familiar lift that came at the start of any trip. Not excitement exactly, more like the clean click of the final piece of a plan settling into place. He was going to see his mother. He'd sit with her, hold her hand, tell her things he'd been meaning to say. Yolanda would be there. It was going to be all right. His phone buzzed. Incoming call. Patrice. He smiled a little. There she was. He'd figured she'd call before wheels up, maybe tell him to text her when he landed, maybe soften whatever had been sitting behind that too-calm smile Tuesday night. He stepped half out of line, one finger raised to the gate agent, 1 second, and answered. "Hey, I'm literally about to board." "You're not boarding." Her voice was flat. Not rushed, not upset, just flat. The way someone sounds when they've already made their decision and don't expect an argument. "I called the airline about 20 minutes ago. I used the rewards account." Andre went still. "I canceled your ticket, Andre." A pause, brief and unbothered. "You haven't been checked in. The system already updated." Another pause. "You're not getting on that flight." The line moved past him. One person, then another, then the last few stragglers from the final boarding group, shuffling through the gate with their bags and their earbuds and their quiet, ordinary lives. The gate agent glanced at Andre once, then looked away. The jetway door stayed open, but not for long. Andre didn't move. "Say that again." His voice came out lower than he intended. Steady, but low. "I canceled your ticket." Patrice didn't repeat it like she was sorry. She repeated it like she was clarifying something simple that he'd misunderstood. "I used the rewards account login, the one you gave me access to." "Patrice." He pressed 2 fingers against his forehead. "My mother is dying." "Your mother has been dying for 2 weeks, Andre. And for 2 weeks I have been trying to get you focused on the gala. She's in hospice, and every single conversation we have turns back to Tuscaloosa. Every one. I needed you here. I have a launch in 8 days." She exhaled slowly, like she was explaining something to someone who wasn't quite following. "I'm not trying to hurt you. I'm trying to help you understand where your priorities need to be." Andre pulled up the travel account on his phone with his free hand. His thumb moved fast. Muscle memory. The same login he'd used 100 times. Incorrect password. He tried again. Same result. His jaw tightened. She'd changed it. She'd gone in before she called him, changed the password, and then called him. The sequence of that sat in his chest like something cold and heavy. "You changed the password." It wasn't a question. "I didn't want you to undo it before we had a chance to talk." "Before we—" He stopped. Started over. Quieter. "Patrice, I need to get on a plane. Right now. I need to get on that plane. There will be other flights. Not today, there won't." He was already switching apps, pulling up every airline he could think of. His eyes moved fast over departure times, connections, layovers. Atlanta to Birmingham. Atlanta to Huntsville. Atlanta to Memphis with a drive down. Every option he found had him landing in Alabama, somewhere between 2 and 4 hours behind where he needed to be. "You knew that," he said quietly. "You knew the timing." Patrice didn't answer that. "Did you know that?" he asked again. "Andre." Her voice shifted into something softer, almost patient. "When you calm down, you're going to understand why I did this." He hung up. He called the airline directly. He stood near the window at gate B14 and watched his plane, his actual plane, push back from the jetway while a representative named Marcus walked him through every available option in a kind, unhurried voice. The earliest flight that could get him to Birmingham would touch down at 2:40 in the afternoon. The service, Marcus confirmed when Andre explained why he needed to get there. The service typically started at— "It's at noon," Andre said. "The funeral is at noon." "I'm sorry, sir. I don't have anything earlier that connects through." He thanked Marcus and ended the call. He stood there another moment with the phone in his hand, watching the plane roll slowly away from the gate through the floor-to-ceiling window. The sky outside was pale blue and enormous, a perfect travel day. The kind of morning where nothing was supposed to go wrong because he had confirmed everything, twice, the way he always did. Except for this. He hadn't confirmed this because he hadn't known to. He called Yolanda. She picked up on the second ring. He could hear it in the background immediately. Low organ music, the careful quiet of people gathering, a door opening and closing somewhere. She was already there. "Hey," she said, "are you landing soon? She's been asking." Andre closed his eyes. "Yo." His voice was careful. He was holding something down with everything he had. "I'm not coming." Silence. "What?" "I'm still in Atlanta. I'm at the gate." He paused. "Patrice canceled my flight." The silence on Yolanda's end stretched out long and strange, the kind that meant she was deciding what to do with what she'd just heard. When she spoke again, her voice was tight, controlled, but barely. "She what?" "I can't get there in time. The next flight doesn't land until after 2. "Andre, tell Mama." He stopped, swallowed, started again. "Tell her I tried to get there. Tell her I was packed and ready, and I was standing at the gate." His voice held. He made sure of it. "Tell her I love her. Okay? Just make sure she knows." Yolanda said something quiet on the other end. It might have been yes. It might have been his name. He wasn't sure because the organ music swelled a little in the background, and then her voice broke into pieces he couldn't hold together. "I'll tell her," she finally said. "I'll tell her." He hung up. He walked to the nearest row of seats and sat down in the first open chair. Gray fabric, hard armrest, facing the window where his plane had been. He set his phone face down on his knee. He stared at the empty gate. Outside, the sky was still blue, clear and endless. The jetway stood disconnected, aimed at nothing. He sat there and let the full weight of it land. His mother was going to be buried today, without him there, because his wife had decided that was the lesson he needed to learn. He didn't go home. He sat in that airport chair for another 20 minutes, phone face down on his knee, watching ground crews move equipment across the tarmac in the pale morning light. Then he stood up, picked up his bag, and walked to the rental car counter on the ground level. The woman behind the counter had a bright smile and a name tag that said Deja. She asked him if he was having a good morning. "I need something with good highway miles," he said. "I'm driving to Alabama tonight." She stopped, smiling, just slightly. Something in his face told her not to push the small talk. She typed quietly and handed him a key card for a gray Nissan in spot 4C. He thanked her and walked to the garage. He left Atlanta at 6:47 in the evening. He didn't call Patrice, didn't text her, didn't leave a note on her phone or a message on the shared calendar she rarely checked anyway. He simply got on I-20 West and drove, and the city fell away behind him in the dark like something he was glad to leave. Yolanda called around 7:30. "Where are you?" she asked. "Just past Anniston." A pause. "You're driving?" "Yeah." She was quiet for a moment. He could hear her moving around, a door closing, the sound dropping to just her voice and the hum of his tires on the road. "The service is done," she said carefully, "but they haven't put her in the ground yet. The burial's in the morning, 8 o'clock. Andre kept his eyes on the highway ahead. "I'll be there," he said. "Andre." Her voice was soft. "You don't have to." "I'll be there, yo." She let it go. "Okay." A beat. "Drive safe." He drove. The highway was mostly empty past 9. Just headlights and distance, mile markers ticking by in the dark. He didn't play music. He didn't turn on the radio. He just drove with both hands on the wheel through the long Alabama night, letting the quiet sit with him, letting it be as heavy as it wanted to be. He thought about his mother's hands, the way she used to hold his face when he was small, both palms flat against his cheeks, like she was making sure he was really there. He thought about the last time he'd visited, 6 weeks ago, how she'd been tired but sharp, still catching everything, still watching the room even from the hospital bed they'd moved into the front room. She'd asked him, quietly, when Patrice had stepped outside, "Are you all right, baby? I mean, really?" He'd told her, yes. He wasn't sure that had been true even then. He drove through the night. He reached the cemetery at 7:53 in the morning. The grass was still wet with dew. The sky was pale gray and soft, the kind of early morning that hadn't decided yet whether it would be beautiful or just cold. He parked on the narrow gravel road near the back fence and walked toward the small gathering. Maybe 8 people still there. The pastor and a few of his mother's church friends. 2 of his cousins he recognized from a distance. Yolanda standing slightly apart from the rest with her coat buttoned to the collar. He didn't rush. He walked the way a man walks when he's already late and knows it. Yolanda saw him first. She didn't say anything. She just moved to make room beside her. He stood next to her and looked at the grave. The casket had already been lowered. The pastor was finishing a final prayer, his voice low and unhurried, one hand raised slightly toward the sky. The flowers, white lilies, his mother's favorite, he knew without having to ask, were arranged along the fresh-turned earth in a long, careful row. Someone had taken care with that. Someone had made sure she had lilies. He stood there with his hands loose at his sides and his face still. He did not break down. Not there. Not where the pastor and his mother's church friends could watch him grieve. He kept it held tight inside his chest, where it had been living since yesterday morning. And he stood at his mother's grave in yesterday's clothes and said goodbye without making a sound. The small group filtered away slowly. His cousins hugged him. The pastor shook his hand and said something kind that he heard but didn't hold on to. And then it was just him and Yolanda, standing together in the wet grass as the cemetery went quiet around them. She put her hand on his arm and left it there. He stood there another minute, maybe 2. Then he picked up his bag and walked back to the car. Yolanda made coffee when they got back to her house. She didn't ask him what he was going to do. She knew him well enough to know he'd already decided. He sat at her kitchen table and opened his laptop. He didn't open his email. He didn't look at his phone. He went straight to the business banking portal, the one he had built, the one he had organized and maintained for the past 4 years because Patrice had never wanted to learn it herself, and he typed in his administrator login. The dashboard loaded. He began, very calmly, to look. He played the part well. During the day, he was quiet and polite. He answered Patrice's questions in short sentences. He ate the food she put in front of him. He said thank you when she refilled his coffee. When she touched his shoulder and told him she was sorry for his loss, as if his mother had simply wandered off somewhere and gotten lost, he nodded and said he was processing it. He was processing something, just not grief. The house went quiet by 10 most nights. Patrice was a heavy sleeper, always had been. By 10:15 he could hear the faint white noise machine running through the ceiling of the bedroom above him. He'd wait another 15 minutes just to be sure. Then he'd open his laptop at the kitchen table, pour himself a glass of water he never drank, and go to work. The kitchen was dark except for the screen. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, the neighborhood was still and black. Just the occasional passing car sweeping light across the wall and gone. He moved through the portal the way he moved through everything. Slow, patient, checking each line twice before moving to the next. The company card records went back 18 months. He wasn't looking for a pattern yet. He was looking for a date. The day of his mother's funeral. He found it on the third night. The charge was listed under travel and accommodations, and it was time-stamped 8:14 in the morning, about 40 minutes before Patrice had called the airline to cancel his ticket. She had booked her own trip first. He sat with that for a moment. Just let it sit there on the screen in plain black text. The amount was 612,500 tatters. The vendor was a resort in Savannah, Georgia, a place called the Lantern and Moss, which he'd never heard of, but which he looked up quickly in a second tab. A boutique hotel with a rooftop bar and a spa menu. The kind of place that called itself a creative retreat experience and charged $280 a night to prove it. The booking covered 2 nights. Checking in the same afternoon, she'd left him standing at the gate. While he was driving through the night to bury his mother alone, Patrice had been checking into a spa resort on the company card. He didn't slam the laptop shut. He didn't push back his chair. He just looked at the number for a long moment, then opened a new spreadsheet tab and typed the date, the vendor, the amount, and the words. Unauthorized company card. Personal travel. No business purpose. He formatted the cell, added a column, and kept going. The gala took him another 2 evenings to untangle. The event itself was legitimate. Vendor invoices, a venue contract, a catering deposit. That was all normal. What wasn't normal was the payment source on 3 of the larger charges. He recognized the last 4 digits immediately because they were his. The personal credit line he had opened 3 years ago and never touched, meant as an emergency buffer, never discussed with Patrice, and certainly never authorized for use on a client event she had been billing at full rate. $11,400. He wrote that number down on the spreadsheet too, in its own column, and he labeled it clearly. He didn't know exactly when she had gotten access to that account. He'd have to pull the full statement to trace it. He made a note to do that in the morning, from his work computer, where he knew she never looked. On the 4th night, almost by accident, he clicked over to the shared travel rewards account. He hadn't used it since before the funeral. He expected to see his balance sitting untouched. What he didn't expect to see was an active booking. Patrice had already rebooked the retreat. Same resort, same room category, different dates. Next month, a Thursday through Saturday. He could see it right there under upcoming trips. The reservation reference number, the hotel name, the confirmation sitting clean and easy in the account she had locked him out of while he was standing at a boarding gate, about to bury his mother. His jaw tightened, just slightly. He added a note to the spreadsheet. Retreat rebooked. Shared rewards account. Reservation reference. He typed in the number from the screen. He sat back in his chair and looked at the ceiling for a moment. White paint, a hairline crack near the light fixture he'd been meaning to patch for 2 years. Then he closed the laptop. Patrice was already up when he came downstairs. She was standing at the counter in her robe, scrolling her phone with one hand and holding her coffee mug with the other. She looked up briefly when he walked in. "You sleep okay?" she asked. "Fine," he said. She nodded and looked back down at her phone. He poured himself coffee, stood at the counter, and drank half of it. Then he kissed her on the cheek. Light, dry, exactly what she expected, and went to get his car keys. He called Yolanda from the driveway before he even started the engine. "Yo," he said when she picked up. "Tell me about Mama's last few weeks. Anything she said to you. Anything at all that you think I might have missed." Yolanda's house smelled like coffee and lemon oil. She kept it the same way their mother had. Clean, orderly, with fresh flowers on the kitchen table, even when nothing else was going right. Today it was yellow chrysanthemums in a mason jar. They sat across from each other at that table, the estate folder open between them, a small stack of their mother's papers sorted into 2 piles. Andre had driven up on a Thursday. He told Patrice it was to handle paperwork. That part was true. It just wasn't the only reason. They worked through the easier items first. The bank accounts, the utility transfers. A subscription Odessa had paid monthly for 11 years to a magazine she never seemed to read. Yolanda had already handled the death certificates and most of the creditor notifications. She was thorough like that. Always had been. It was after the second cup of coffee that Yolanda set down her pen and looked at him. "There's something I need to tell you," she said. "I've been holding it because I didn't know the right time. But I think the right time is now." Andre looked up. "Mama called me," Yolanda said, "about 6 weeks before she passed. Just me, not you." He waited. Yolanda folded her hands on the table. She said she was worried about Patrice. Not in a vague way. Mama wasn't vague about anything. She said she thought Patrice was planning something involving the house. She paused. She didn't use the word scheming. But that's what she meant. The word landed quietly. Andre kept his face still. "She never told me," he said. "She didn't want to upset you while she was still sick. You know how she was. She wasn't going to drop something like that on you and then not be around to help you deal with it." Andre looked at the chrysanthemums for a moment. Their bright yellow heads nodded slightly in the draft from the ceiling vent. He thought about his mother, her careful way of moving through problems, how she never reacted until she understood the full shape of a thing. "Did she say anything else?" he asked. Yolanda reached across to the second pile of papers, the ones she hadn't explained yet, and pulled out a manila envelope. It was sealed with a metal clasp and had Odessa's handwriting on the front. Just 3 words. For Andre. Eventually. "I found this in her desk," Yolanda said. "In the locked drawer. The key was in her Bible. You know the one. She kept it on the nightstand." Andre took the envelope. He undid the clasp and opened it slowly. Inside was a set of legal documents. Thick paper, formal language, stamped and signed. He recognized the structure immediately. He'd seen enough legal paperwork in his work life to know what a trust amendment looked like. His mother had restructured the Whitfield family trust. The date on the amendment was 8 months ago. He read it carefully. Twice. The house he and Patrice lived in, the one that felt like his, but that he'd never thought deeply about in legal terms, was held in the Whitfield family trust. Had been for years. He knew that much. What he hadn't known was what his mother had done to it quietly, on her own, without telling him. The amendment contained a clause near the end. It was written in plain language, almost unusually plain for a legal document, as if whoever drafted it had been instructed to make it impossible to misread. The clause stated that in the event a spouse was demonstrated to have acted against the family's interests during a period of medical crisis or bereavement, sole authority over any trust-held property would revert entirely to the Whitfield family heir, to Andre. He read it a 3rd time. Then he set it flat on the table and pressed his palm against the page. His mother had known. Not in the way you know when someone tells you something. In the deeper way, the way she had always known things about people, quietly, without making a scene about it. She had watched Patrice for 9 years, seen something Andre had been too close to see, and then, while she was dying, she had done something about it. She hadn't lectured him, hadn't warned him in a way that would force him to defend his wife or argue with his mother in her final months. She had simply fixed it, moved the pieces into place, and left him the envelope. For Andre. Eventually, he exhaled through his nose, long and slow. "She never said a word to me," he said again. Softer this time. Yolanda reached over and put her hand on his. "She said enough." He nodded. He gathered the documents back into the envelope, pressed the clasp shut, and held it in both hands for a moment, before sliding it into the inside pocket of his jacket. On the drive home, he stopped once for gas and sat in the parking lot for a few minutes with the engine off. Back at the house, he went straight to his desk. He unlocked the bottom drawer, placed the envelope inside, and locked it again. He held the key for a moment, then put it in his pocket. Then he picked up his phone and pulled up a name he hadn't called in weeks. Desmond Okafor. He pressed call. Andre didn't go to Desmond right away. He needed to be sure first. That was how he operated. Always had been. He didn't move on a thing until he could see it completely, until every piece had a place and no gaps were left open for someone to exploit. It was the same discipline he used at work, the same instinct that made him good at his job. You don't ship a load until the manifest is clean. So before he called Desmond back to confirm the meeting, he opened the laptop. It was late Sunday afternoon. Patrice was out. A client walkthrough, she'd said, though she hadn't offered details and he hadn't asked. The house was quiet. He sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water and the curtains half drawn against the setting sun and pulled up the business banking portal. He wasn't looking for anything new. He thought he already had what he needed. He was wrong. He started with the company card charge he'd flagged in Chapter 4, the one that had paid for Patrice's retreat trip the week of the funeral. He'd noted the amount, noted the date, noted the vendor, but this time he pulled the full transaction record and cross-referenced it against the account's internal message log. The portal had a built-in communication thread feature, something he'd set up years ago so Patrice and Bianca could leave notes on charges for the accountant. Neither of them used it consistently, but sometimes they did. There was a thread on the retreat charge. He clicked it open. The first message was from Bianca, time-stamped the morning of the funeral, before the service had even started. Go ahead and use the company card for the retreat. I'll categorize it under client development. Won't show up where he can see it. Andre read it once. Then again, he kept scrolling. Patrice had replied 20 minutes later. You sure? He's going to be in Alabama. He might check. Bianca's response came back fast. He's going to be a mess. He won't be checking anything. And even if he does, it'll be buried. Just go. There was a pause in the thread. Almost 2 hours. Then Patrice again. I went ahead and canceled the flight. He needs a wake-up call. He's been impossible since she got sick. Andre's jaw tightened. He didn't move for a moment. He just sat there with the screen in front of him, reading that sentence 3 times. He's been impossible since she got sick. His mother had been dying. He had been driving her to appointments, handling her insurance paperwork, coordinating with her doctors across state lines while working full-time, and maintaining every financial account his wife depended on. That was what impossible looked like to Patrice. Bianca's reply to that message was short. Good. He needs to understand who his priority is. This will fix it. He kept reading. There were a few more messages, logistics about the retreat, a note about a client dinner Bianca had scheduled, but the core of it was right there in that thread, plain and documented. Bianca hadn't stumbled into this after the fact. She hadn't heard about the flight cancellation and failed to stop it. She had helped build it. She had given Patrice the cover to charge the trip without leaving a trace on the joint account, and she had told her to do it. For her own reasons, Andre realized. If Patrice's attention was back on the business, the gala went smoothly. The partnership stayed intact. Bianca's investment in the company stayed protected. Andre's grief was just a scheduling inconvenience to both of them. He took screenshots. Every message. Every timestamp. He saved them into a folder he'd already started on the secure drive he used for work documents. A folder he'd labeled simply with the date his mother had been buried. Inside it, he had already placed scanned copies of the trust amendment, photos of the personal credit line charges he hadn't authorized, and the original transaction records for the retreat charge. Now he added the message thread. He went back through everything once, slowly. The credit line misuse. The company card used to hide Patrice's travel. The message thread showing Bianca had coordinated it and given Patrice permission. The trust documents his mother had drawn up 8 months ago, anticipating exactly this. He organized it all into a single folder, named the documents clearly, numbered them. Then he closed the laptop and put both hands flat on the table. He thought about Bianca for a moment, her professional handshakes at company events, the way she called him by his first name with practiced warmth, the Christmas card she and Patrice sent together every year with a logo in the corner. He had treated her like a colleague, like someone operating in good faith. She had watched his mother get sick and decided it was a problem for the business. He picked up his phone. Desmond had already confirmed their phone call for Tuesday. Andre pulled up the message thread and typed a reply. Actually, can we meet in person? It's not just about the estate anymore. He set the phone down on the table and waited. Camille Boudreau lived in a brick ranch house in Decatur, with rose bushes along the front walk and a welcome mat that said, "Blessed." Andre had been inside it dozens of times over 9 years. He knew where she kept the good china, knew she drank her coffee with too much cream, knew she called Patrice every morning before 10 without fail. He also knew she had never once asked him how his mother was doing. Not in 2 years of Odessa's decline. Not a single phone call, not a card, not a passing question at Thanksgiving. Andre had noticed. He'd filed it away the way he filed everything, quietly, without comment. He called ahead, told Camille he was in her area and wanted to stop by if she had time, that he could use the company. She said yes, immediately. She sounded pleased. He brought flowers, yellow ones. He wasn't sure why. Habit, maybe, or some instinct toward appearances that 9 years of marriage had installed in him. He rang the bell at 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday, wearing a plain gray shirt and a calm expression he had been practicing since Alabama. Camille opened the door in a house dress, arms out. "Andre, baby." She pulled him into a hug that smelled like powder and something floral. "Come in, come in. I was so sorry to hear about your mama." She didn't sound sorry. She sounded the way people sound when they're fulfilling a social obligation. But Andre nodded, thanked her, and stepped inside. She had sweet tea ready. She set the flowers in a vase without being asked and waved him toward the living room couch like he was a regular visitor at a regular time. The television was muted in the corner. A family photo on the wall, Patrice in her college graduation gown, Camille standing proud beside her. No one else in the frame. They sat. They talked about Odessa for a few minutes, or rather, Camille talked, offering brief, surface-level condolences while redirecting toward other subjects. The gala was coming up. Patrice was working so hard. The business was really finding its footing. Andre nodded along. He sipped his tea. He waited. It didn't take long. "You know," Camille said, settling back in her chair with the ease of someone about to offer an opinion they'd been holding. "I told Patrice she needed to do something. Get your attention back where it belonged. I love you, Andre. You know I do. But a man who's been pulled away from his wife for 2 solid months, that's a problem that needs addressing." She said it gently, almost kindly, like she was sharing wisdom. 2 months, Andre said. "At least, she was practically running that whole business alone while you were up and down to Alabama every other week." Camille shook her head. "I told her, I said, Patrice, you need to do something dramatic. Make him see. A little tough love never hurt anybody." She picked up her tea glass and took a sip. Andre looked at the welcome mat through the open front door. "Blessed. Something dramatic," he said quietly. "She loves you," Camille added, as though that explained it. As though love was the bracket that made all of it acceptable. The missed funeral, the locked account, the message thread, the credit charges. She just needs to feel like a priority. That's not too much to ask. "No," Andre said. "I understand." He stayed another 20 minutes. He didn't tell her what he knew. He didn't raise his voice or shift his expression or give her a single thing to remember as unusual. He thanked her for the tea. He said the flowers looked nice in the vase. He drove away and sat in the parking lot of a gas station 2 blocks over and typed 2 sentences into the Notes app on his phone. Camille confirmed she instructed Patrice to do something dramatic about divided attention during mother's illness. Describes Odessa's decline as 2 months of inconvenience to the marriage. He read it back. Then he pulled out of the parking lot and drove to Desmond's office. Desmond Okafor's office was on the fourth floor of a building downtown that smelled like carpet cleaner and central air. His name was on the door in clean block letters. His desk was almost as organized as Andre's kitchen table had been over the past week. Almost. He didn't say anything when Andre spread the folder across the desk. He just looked. He read the message thread between Patrice and Bianca slowly, going back twice to the timestamps. He looked at the credit line charges, the company card transaction, the retreat booking still sitting live in the shared travel account. He read the trust amendment, all 4 pages of it, with the careful attention of a man who already understood what he was looking at, just making sure. Then he looked at Andre. "Your mother wrote this clause 8 months ago," Desmond said. "Yes. And Patrice has no idea it exists. She never looked at the trust documents. I handled all of that." Desmond sat back in his chair. He pressed his fingers together. He was quiet for a moment, not the uncertain kind of quiet, but the kind that meant he was arranging things. "Okay," he said. "Here's what you have." He counted on his fingers. The unauthorized personal credit line charges gave Andre grounds to revoke Patrice's authorized user status immediately. No notice required. The company card misuse, with Bianca's coordination documented in the message thread, created exposure for the business partnership that the insurer and outside accountant would need to know about. The trust clause, triggered the moment a spouse acted against family interests during a medical or bereavement crisis, was already satisfied by the flight cancellation itself. The house was already Andre's. It had been since the funeral. "And the retreat trip," Desmond said, glancing at the transaction record. "Still booked?" "Still booked." "Same account she used to lock you out?" "Same account." Desmond almost smiled. He didn't quite, but almost. "You built the whole system." "I did." "Then you know how to dismantle it." Andre nodded once. They spent the next hour going through it carefully, not rushing, not cutting corners. Desmond mapped out the 4 actions in the order they needed to happen. First, the authorized user revocation on the business credit line. Second, the retreat cancellation through the travel rewards account. Third, the spousal health coverage termination, timed to coincide with the divorce filing. Fourth, the formal triggering of the trust clause on the house, filed with documentation attached. All 4 on the same morning. "You want them to land at the same time?" Desmond asked. "I want her to understand they're not accidents," Andre said. Desmond wrote the last item on his legal pad and capped his pen. "Give me until the end of the week to get the paperwork ready," he said. "Then we pick the date." Andre closed the folder. He slid it back across the desk toward Desmond and stood. "I want to do it in person," he said. "I want her to hear it from me." "I'll be there." Andre picked up his keys. He thought for a moment about how to phrase the next part, how to frame it in a way that sounded ordinary, logistical, the kind of thing a man says when he's keeping things calm while he figures out next steps. Then he took out his phone, opened his messages to Patrice, and typed the words he'd been composing in the back of his mind since the gas station parking lot in Decatur. "Can we set aside some time next Saturday? I want to sit down and talk about moving forward. Just us and some people I trust." He hit send. He walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. His phone buzzed in his pocket before he reached the ground floor. Patrice's reply came back in under a minute. "Of course. I think that's a great idea. It's time." The elevator opened. Andre stepped out into the lobby, past the front desk, through the glass doors, and out into the afternoon sun. He didn't reply. The house was clean. That was the first thing Patrice noticed when she came downstairs Saturday morning. The kitchen smelled like coffee. The living room cushions were straight. Andre had even opened the blinds, letting in the kind of flat winter light that made everything look sharp and clear. She'd dressed for this. Hair done. A soft blue wrap dress that Andre used to say looked good on her. She'd been rehearsing things in her head all week. Warm things, Reasonable things. We both know things got out of hand. We can move forward. She'd even practiced a version where she cried first. Got ahead of it. She came around the corner into the living room and stopped. Yolanda was sitting in the chair by the window. Desmond Okafor was on the couch, a dark leather portfolio closed across his knee, his expression professional and completely unreadable. Patrice's smile flickered. I didn't know we were having company. Sit down, Patrice, Andre said. He was standing near the fireplace, hands loose at his sides, his voice carrying none of the exhaustion she'd expected. He wasn't the man who'd been quietly moving through the house all week, eyes down, barely speaking. Something had shifted in his posture, in his face. She sat. Andre didn't sit. He stayed standing, and he started talking. He didn't raise his voice, not once. He spoke the way he ran his logistics reports at work. Methodical, sequenced, nothing left out. He told her about the gate. Standing in line, boarding group called, bag on his shoulder, when her voice came through the phone and told him she'd already done it. He told her about the locked account, about sitting in an airport chair and calling Yolanda to say he wasn't coming, about renting a car and driving through the night alone, arriving at the cemetery at sunrise to stand over his mother's fresh grave by himself, in the cold, while the last of the attendees were still walking back to their cars. Patrice opened her mouth twice. Both times he kept going. He told her about the company card charge, the retreat she'd booked for herself on the same day he missed the funeral, covered by the business account, so it wouldn't land anywhere he monitored. He told her about his personal credit line, pulled without his authorization to fund the gala she'd said he wasn't supporting. He set a printed page on the coffee table. That's the charge date, the amount, and the account it came from, he said. Your signature is on the approval request. Patrice looked at the paper like it might move on its own. Then he told her about Bianca. He read 2 lines from the message thread out loud. Bianca's words, time-stamped the morning of the funeral. He needs a wake-up call. We'll charge the trip to the business account. It won't show on the joint. He set that page down next to the first one. Patrice's jaw tightened. That is completely out of context. And your mother, Andre said, told me herself. Wednesday afternoon. Her living room. Sweet tea. He paused for one beat. She said she told you to do something dramatic, that my mother's decline was 2 months of inconvenience to the marriage. The room went quiet. Yolanda was watching Patrice the way a person watches something they've been waiting a long time to see. Andre reached into the folder on the mantel and set one more document on the table. The trust amendment, 4 pages, notarized, dated 8 months ago. My mother knew, he said simply. She restructured the family trust before she died. If a spouse acted against the family's interests during a medical or bereavement crisis, sole authority over this property transfers to me. That clause triggered the day you canceled my flight. He looked at her steadily. You've been living in my house since then. Patrice stood up. Andre, I'm not finished. She sat back down. You canceled my flight, he said, to teach me priorities. He let that sit for exactly 1 second. So I canceled yours. He told her what had already happened that morning, before she'd come downstairs. Her authorized user status on the business credit line had been revoked at 9 a.m. The retreat trip, still sitting in the shared travel rewards account she'd once changed the password on, had been canceled using his administrator access at 9:15. Her spousal health coverage was set to terminate concurrent with the divorce filing Desmond had prepared and would file Monday morning. And the house was already handled. Had been for weeks. Patrice's face moved through 3 different expressions in about 10 seconds. Her eyes filled first. Andre, please, you don't have to do this. We can talk. We are talking. I made a mistake, okay? Her voice cracked on cue, practiced and sharp at the same time. I panicked. I was scared you were pulling away, and I made a terrible decision. That doesn't mean you throw away 9 years. You made the decision, he said. You also made a second one to change the password, and a third one to charge the retreat the same day. Those aren't panic. Those are plans. She tried anger next. Her voice went flat and hard. You want to blow up this whole marriage because your mother died? You're grieving and making permanent decisions. I'm not grieving right now, Andre said. Right now, I'm being exact. He nodded once toward Desmond. Desmond opened the portfolio, removed the filing papers, and stood up. He crossed the room quietly and set them on the coffee table in front of Patrice, next to the printed charge records and the trust amendment and the message thread. Andre picked up his keys from the mantel. The rest of it is already in motion elsewhere, he said. Desmond will explain the timeline. The event planning office was on the third floor of a glass building off Peachtree, the kind of place that looked expensive from the outside, but was mostly held together by good lighting and a strong Wi-Fi signal. Andre had been here a dozen times, helped Patrice pick out the desk chairs, set up the billing software himself. He took the elevator up alone. Bianca was already inside when he pushed through the frosted glass door. She was standing behind the reception counter with a coffee mug and a careful smile, the kind she used on clients she wasn't sure about yet. Andre? Her voice was steady, but her eyes moved to the folder under his arm. I heard about the meeting yesterday. I think there's probably a lot of… Sit down, Bianca. The smile held for one more second. Then it didn't. She sat at the small table by the window. Andre sat across from her and opened the folder without ceremony. He slid the first printed page across the table and let her read it. She looked at it the way Patrice had looked at hers, like she was hoping the words might rearrange themselves into something less clear. They didn't. That's your message, Andre said. Time-stamped 7:43 in the morning. The same morning my mother was being buried in Alabama. He tapped the line he'd read aloud the day before. He needs a wake-up call. We'll charge the trip to the business account. It won't show on the joint. That's your suggestion. Your words. Bianca set the page down. Andre, I was trying to support my business partner. Whatever Patrice decided to do, you didn't just support her. You arranged the cover. He slid the second page across. The company card statement, the charge date, the retreat booking. You put her trip on the business account yourself so I wouldn't see it. That's not moral support. That's fraud. The word landed hard. Bianca's chin came up slightly. That's a strong word. It's the correct one. He pulled the folder back. I spoke with the business insurer this morning. I have a call scheduled Monday with the outside accountant, the one whose name is also on this account, not yours. You're being named formally in the fraud claim alongside Patrice. He paused. That claim goes to your client base too, since several of them are shared contacts on your business registration. Bianca's composure cracked, just slightly, at the edges. Her hands moved around the coffee mug. Andre, if you would just let me explain. You already explained. He tapped the page. 7:43 in the morning. She went quiet. Andre closed the folder and stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You built this business on other people's trust, he said. You should have been more careful with whose. He left her sitting at the table. The printed pages spread out in front of her like an exam she hadn't studied for and couldn't retake. Camille Boudreau lived 40 minutes south, in a wide brick house with a neatly kept yard and a welcome mat that said, Family First, in yellow letters. Andre had always found that funny, in a quiet way. He didn't find it funny today. She opened the door before he knocked. She must have seen his car from the window. She had on a house dress and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead, and her expression carried the particular brand of concerned warmth she deployed when she knew she was in trouble. Andre, sweetheart. She stepped back to let him in. I've been thinking about you. You know, this whole situation has been so… I'm not coming in, he said. She stopped. Her hand rested on the doorframe. Andre stood on the welcome mat and kept his voice even. You told Patrice to do something dramatic. Your words. She told me you said Odessa's decline was 2 months of inconvenience. He watched Camille's face try to find the right shape. I'm not here to argue about what you meant. I'm here to tell you what happens next. Andre, I was only trying to help my daughter. You have to understand that a mother, I understand exactly what you did. He kept going. You're not welcome at the house. Not now. Not after the filing. Not in any capacity related to the family trust or anything connected to my mother's estate. If you contact Yolanda, she'll refer you to Desmond. That's not a threat. That's the boundary. And it's permanent. Camille's eyes filled. Her voice went soft. You're cutting me off over advice I gave my own child? She's my daughter, Andre. And Odessa was my mother. He held her gaze for one steady beat. I drove through the night and stood at her grave alone at sunrise. I think you know the difference. Camille didn't answer. Andre stepped back off the welcome mat. Take care of yourself, Camille, he said. And he meant it the way people mean it when they've said everything else. He walked back to the car without looking back. The drive home was quiet. No radio, no calls, just the gray winter sky and the long stretch of highway leading back to the house on Whitfield land. A house now legally and completely his. The business accounts were frozen. The filing was prepared. Patrice had no credit access, no travel account, no health coverage pending, no home to stand in as her own, and no one left to call. 6 months was enough time for the grass to grow back over the disturbed earth. Andre noticed that first. The grave was settled now, the mound gone flat, the ground looking the way it had always looked beneath the old oak at the edge of the homestead property, like it had been this way for years, like the land had accepted her back and closed over the loss quietly, the way Odessa herself had handled most things in her life. The folding chairs were already set up in 2 short rows when Andre arrived that morning. Yolanda had arranged them the night before. 6 chairs total. Just family, and the people who had known Odessa long enough to call her by her first name. No program. No printed order of service. Just Reverend Tobias Grant standing under the oak with his worn Bible and his unhurried voice. A man who had known their mother for 30 years and didn't need notes to talk about her. Andre stood at the end of the front row, in a dark gray suit. Not black. Their mother had always said black was for strangers. She was a woman who planned ahead, Reverend Grant said, his voice low and even in the cold morning air. Not because she was afraid of what was coming, but because she loved the people she was leaving behind, and she wanted them to be all right. Yolanda reached over and squeezed Andre's arm once, then let go. He didn't look away from the headstone. The service lasted 40 minutes. It was exactly what the funeral hadn't been. Unhurried, quiet, and full of the right kind of silence. The kind that wasn't empty. Reverend Grant told 2 stories about Odessa that Andre hadn't heard before, and Andre filed them away carefully, the way he filed away everything that mattered. After the final prayer, the small group stood for a moment in the pale winter light before drifting back toward the house for coffee and food Yolanda had spent 2 days preparing. Andre stayed behind. At work, his promotion had come through in November. Senior Director of Regional Operations. His manager, a blunt woman named Carol Hewitt, who rarely said more than she needed to, had delivered the news in a single sentence. You're the one who always has the documentation when no one else does. That's worth something here. Andre had thanked her and gone back to his desk. He didn't think about Patrice when it happened. That had surprised him the first time. He thought he would. He thought he'd want her to know, want her to hear about it, and feel the weight of what she'd dismissed. But when the moment came, there was nothing there. No anger, no satisfaction pointed in her direction. Just the quiet, clean feeling of a man being recognized for something real. He'd heard about Patrice only twice in 6 months, both times through people who mentioned it the way they mentioned weather, incidentally, with no particular emphasis. She was working coordination at a mid-level catering company now, the kind of vendor she once spoke to from the other side of a contract. The business was gone. The house was gone. The credit was untangled and accounted for. Every unauthorized charge documented and closed. She had not reached out to Andre. He had not expected her to. She was not at the center of anyone's story anymore. That was not cruelty. It was just consequence, playing out the way consequence does when no one intervenes to stop it. When the yard was empty, and the voices from the house had softened to a low murmur behind the windows, Andre walked across the grass to his mother's grave. He crouched down in front of the headstone. The stone was gray granite with small flowers carved at the corners. Yolanda had chosen it, but Andre had approved every detail. The name was clean and precise, the way Odessa had been. He rested his forearms on his knees and looked at it for a moment without speaking. Then he said, "I'm in the house. Your house." He said it simply, like a report, like she had asked him to check in, and he was checking in. No debt on it. The trust held exactly the way you set it up. Desmond says it's airtight. He paused. You knew what you were doing. The oak moved slightly overhead. A branch shifted. A few dead leaves came down. "I was angry at you for a while," he said. "Not at you. But I thought—" He stopped, started again. "I thought patience was just something people said when they didn't have a better answer. Just something you said to keep the peace." He looked at her name in the stone. "But you weren't keeping the peace. You were keeping the leverage. You were building something and waiting for the right moment. And you were quiet about it the whole time. And nobody saw it coming, except you." He was quiet for a moment. "That's not weakness," he said. "That's precision." He stayed crouched there for another beat, his hands still, his breathing steady. Then he stood, brushed the grass from his knees, and turned back toward the car. He walked the same way he did everything, without rushing, without looking back, already thinking about what came next. The house was warm and waiting. He went home. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.